Rewind-A-Dynamite from the post-wrestling site. AEW lighting up the fuse. Sit back and enjoy the bubbly as we hear from Jon and Wai Ting. Where we're going, we don't need roads, and if the buck stops here, this thing might blow. Everything you hear are opinions of the show, and if you don't like it, go to the forums and let them know.
Rewind-A-Dynamite is live in your ears, in front of your eyes. I am John Pollock alongside Wai Ting. Moments after AEW Dynamite, 2 hours and 2 minutes of Dynamite from Edmonton.
Yeah, moments is right, and I don't know if I was just so behind on my buffer that I usually have when I'm watching these shows or what. But man, it feels like we have less and less time to rush onto this broadcast.
We do. This was the second week in a row that they went 2 minutes over. And as we saw last week, those 2 minutes, they had a big jump, and they continued it this week. And I would not be surprised if this becomes the pattern of going 2 minutes over.
Awesome. Great. Well, what's 2 more minutes? I mean, we already have 2 extra hours, come on. Give me 20 more minutes of an overrun.
Give them time, Wai. Give them time. They're now into the interest of giving more is more. That is going to be the slogan here. But we will have lots of Dynamite to discuss from Edmonton, Alberta. A much livelier crowd than Hamilton. With all due respect to our fellow Ontarians, it was Edmonton. They showed up and sounded loud on Wednesday night. So that's a good thing. How many of those people realized when they bought this ticket and sat in their seat at Rogers Place that they were going to be given the option to sit through Rampage 100?
I don't know if that was advertised. So
I don't think anyone was aware until Excalibur announced that it's Rampage 100 this Friday.
I'd be curious if that's any sort of attraction for people or if it's not.
Well, we're going to find out on Friday. Can they top last week's number, which was a very good Rampage number? We will find out. Not a great Collision number, though.
I mean, they did just announce, the card for Rampage 100, so that's ultimately going to be the big factor. And they have a big match here. Home Bucks versus the Dark Order that this show directly leads to.
You're right. It's a notable match for Rampage. Mm-hmm. I would, again, you are going to get from the AEW side that all of our shows are important, and there's no, of course, throwing in the towel. But I would say that if the Young Bucks and Hangman were teaming up and they were wrestling on TV this week, other than the obvious, it should be on Collision. Should it not? This is the biggest thing we have going right now. And for obvious reasons, that's not happening. But just for a business reason, should we be putting a Young Bucks match on Rampage on Friday night versus the show that we absolutely need to rebound from last week from?
Maybe there's an argument that could be made that Punk versus Joe is enough of that sort of hook. And, you still want to make sure that all your ships are floating. And Rampage does need something that is also attractive.
Well, last week, Rampage did not need much, and it did just fine.
Well, then why do you need the? I mean, is that an aberration, or is it something that you could depend on?
We're going to find out. But Rampage is it's set in its ways. Rampage is not going to make some big renaissance where it's going to all of a sudden, add a third of its audience and be up 30% over this summer. Rampage is not the show that we are hoping will become right below Dynamite, if not Dynamite level. Collision is. So I would be putting a lot of my resources into Collision. But again, it more so just points out this idea that we're not going to have crossover here between these two parties, and we have these separate factions. But this is one case where you can make the argument, yes, it does affect business in a certain way, because if this is all hands on deck, then I would be booking that match on Collision and not on Rampage, because Rampage is what it is. It is already baked into whatever they're going to get in their next round of negotiations. Whereas Collision, this is the big carrot that is being dangled. Are we looking at another Dynamite, or are we looking at another Rampage? And this is a critical time period. The jury's out on Collision, but it was a concerning number last week in week 3. And hopefully this Saturday will be, that is the bottoming out number from this past week. You would think they're up this week in Regina.
You would hope so. I mean, we'll talk about maybe how we felt about the promotion for Joe versus Punk, but that really is the thing that I think this show is kind of, putting its hopes on.
All built around that.
Yeah, last week that particular collision really had nothing big. Previously.
It was the Owen tournament. If you were interested in the tournament, that was it.
Yeah,
and if you tuned in on Dynamite and weren't paying attention to stuff online, like you weren't even told Punk was going to be on the show in any form or fashion. So they didn't tell you any of that last Wednesday.
You're talking also about probably a good chunk of the audience that had probably watched Money in the Bank that afternoon, or was maybe saving it for the evening to watch it. And, by comparison, a punkless collision, at least according to what was announced, did not seem as important for people's viewing.
Well, we'll talk about how effectively they promoted Collision and the Joe Punk match that is coming up on Saturday's show. Want to make some mentions of stuff on the site this week. We have a ton of great shows to check out. Today, Braden Davey dropping the latest edition of Up Next, going over NXT from Tuesday night. And we have joining us on Pollock and Thurston, we had about an hour-long chat with Chris Hero of West Coast Pro. They have a show coming up this Saturday night on independentwrestling.tv with their Cruel Summer event. And Chris is just, it was just great to talk about so many different subjects. He's very open about all of his experiences. This is a 25-year veteran and someone whose opinion I think people hold very high in the wrestling community. And he was seemed to have a great time coming on the show and chatting with us. So if you want to go check this out about, his time in WWE, coming up in IWA Mid-South, and just all the different experiences that he has had. We tried to cover as much as we could, but it was just scratching the surface with Chris on the show. But I enjoyed the interview a lot.
Somebody I hope who never enters the wrestling TV reviewing game, because his analytical mind would put all of us out of work. He's a fantastic, interview to listen to. And I thought you guys did a great job. I could have listened to him speak for, another 3 hours and 2 minutes.
We would have done an overrun for sure for Chris. So yeah, he was very generous with his time. When I asked him to come on, I said, 20, 25 minutes we'll shoot for. And 10 minutes in, I knew, okay, we should go a bit longer here because this is going to be great. So yes, you can check that out on both the Post Wrestling and WrestleNomics feeds. We also will have momentarily our review of New Japan Strong's Independence Day cards from Bruce Lord and Karen Peterson. That is up for Post Wrestling Cafe members. And my goodness, Wade, this graphic is beautiful. Look at this. This is patriotic if there ever was one.
Red, white, and blue, of course. What better way to celebrate Independence Day than with skewers in your forehead? I had a chance to watch a bunch of the matches off of this show, and
we'll chat about them. Yeah, because I saw a handful between the 2 days as well.
Yeah, I'll just say they were asking people to pay $30 for this, and for both nights together, so $15 a show, and I felt it was a well worth it amount. Like, I thought you had some really good quality stuff on these shows, so I can't wait to hear Karen and Bruce's thoughts on it.
So that is up now for Cafe members, and on the Post Wrestling Cafe, we also have Rewind-A, catching up with Supercard of Honor 2013, Kevin Steen versus Jay Briscoe in the midst of ROH versus Scum and the battle for control of ROH. And this gives us it is a good companion to the show we just did on Best in the World from 2011, when Sinclair had just bought the company. Now we're almost 2 years into the Sinclair era. Where are things? What is the identity of ROH? It's certainly no longer the ROH of old, and it would not be the ROH that would be kind of its second big wave of popularity years later when the Bucks and Cody were involved. So this is sort of looking at what is ROH in 2013 amidst iPay-per-view issues and a major title change that is fondly remembered, and lots more from the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City in 2013.
Yeah, a show that you and I had actually attended. So not that we have much personal anecdotes from the evening, because you and I had probably forgotten almost everything from that point on. But nonetheless, we do remember certain things about that particular trip and being in the Hammerstein Ballroom / the Manhattan Center. So we do spend a lot of time talking about our experiences as well. We spend quite a bit of time talking about Joe versus Punk as well, in their connection to ROH's history. And John Pollock debuted on this particular podcast his Tony Khan impression. So I urge everybody to just simply download the show for that reason. postwrestlingcafe.com, video.postwrestling.com.
And finally, Friday night, Wai Ting gets a much-deserved night off, so I will get to do a rare show with Andrew Thompson as we will be doing Rewind to SmackDown, covering the show from Madison Square Garden. We will just be doing SmackDown on Friday. So Rampage 100, perhaps John Cena and Kate from Montreal can touch on that if they watch it by Collision course time, which will be dropping on the cafe this weekend. So lots to check out, as always, at postwrestling.com and postwrestlingcafe.com, which is where we are for the rest of the week into the weekend, and video.postwrestling.com to keep up on our latest stylings and getting a look at our profiles.
Don't forget MCU later, dropping tomorrow.
I was just about to say my favorite show that I'm consuming on Disney Plus, Secret Invasion.
You have to think about the name for a second, didn't you? All right.
When will you be back on MCU later? Are you following Secret Invasion?
I'm honestly having a really tough time even keeping up with like anything but wrestling at the moment. So part of the reason why, I'm not joining them this season, but I'll await the call. I'll wait the signal from WH and Rich.
Well, you'll probably get some time to catch up when the G1 starts next week as well. So we have that to look forward to as well. So all that beginning our G1 pool, it is open, postwrestling.com/G1, free to enter. So join in now, get your picks in before July 15th when the tournament begins. And there you go. A big thank you to Chris Engler for always being our administrator of the G1 Climax pool. And we will be keeping everyone, the tallies going throughout the tournament with updates on the standings and such and how people perform with their picks.
Can you beat Randobot? Can you beat me? Can you beat Jon
Randobot?
Pollock?
Might be in. There's been some good booking this year from New Japan, so Randobot might be in for some a tough tournament. We're gonna find out, or maybe this is tailor made for him or her. We've never identified the gender of Randobot.
Yeah, probably. We'll have to ask.
Okay, let's move on to news and notes. So Brandon and I did talk about the Collision number, but I did want to get some of your reaction, Way. So they did 452,000 viewers and a 0.13 in the demo. That was down 24% in viewers from week 2 and 37% decline in the 18 to 49 number. 18 to 34 was even more concerning because it was down 59% from week 2, and males 18 to 34 down 82% from the second week. And this was less men 18 to 34 than Rampage, than Dynamite. It was 1,000 more than Dark Side of the Ring did for the Junkyard Dog episode. So it was a very low number with men 18 to 34, and tells you when there is a show that does not feel noteworthy, this is an audience that is going to suffer greatly. But everything was down from week number 2. Do you look at this as a concerning number, or are you looking at this as, this was one that, for better or worse, this was one we could also see going into Saturday, that it's not like this felt like a big show and gave a disappointing number. It felt like a show that lacked a lot of buzz, and the number backed that theory up.
I think I would be more so concerned about the lack of effort put into generating that buzz. You're not even a month into this thing, and you should be putting every effort into every single one of these shows, at least for the first month, just to get people to establish a habit. They had it easy this Saturday when they didn't have to go head to head with the WWE pay-per-view. That's
Correct.
not going to be the case once a month for these Saturday shows. So, at least once a month, people are going to break their habits to not watch this thing anyway. This is the time to really establish yourself and to make every episode feel must-see. And they did not do that whatsoever with that lineup. It's very different for this one, because this one to me does feel very must-see because of just, my own personal interest in Punk versus Joe. But, is that going to extend to the general audience? That I'm not necessarily sure about, but still, this was one of all the things that, were being promoted for professional wrestling last week that did not feel all that important, unfortunately. So it's not that surprising to me, but what I am surprised about is the lack of effort in making it feel special.
Yeah, this is one where, you can look at, it was, the long weekend, it was a Saturday night, but to me, it's factors that affected SmackDown, even SmackDown being taped as well on Friday, not 2 days in advance, but it still was tape delayed. And if you wanted to read spoilers, you could for SmackDown. And to me, this was more indicative of a very hot show on Friday and a rather cold show on Saturday. And you can come up with different reasons that this would have been affected. But I think you could go to people on Friday and what's your sense of what Collision was going to do? I don't know if you're predicting this level of a drop off, but I don't think anyone was expecting it to grow over week 3. And it was just going to be a case of how much was it down from week 2, because it did not have that urgency. And to get this show up and running, it has to have that urgent feel. This was the first week where this did feel like a show that if you catch it, great. If not, it's not the end of the world. And for many people, this show revolves around Punk. And this was a week where Punk's involvement on commentary, it was not going to be plan altering if you're a Punk fan to tune into this.
Does it make you concerned for a week where Punk might not be there for whatever reason? If like God forbid the guy gets injured again or whatever happens and it takes him off the road, what else is this?
Oh, these are all, this is a show that cannot forever exist off of Punk. Like, Punk is there to get this show up and running, but it cannot just be the CM Punk show. It's too much to ask of any one person to carry a show this week, much less a guy who, yes, has the injury history, is 44. He can't be wrestling every week on this show. You are going to need weeks where he's either on commentary or he's off. Like, that's going to happen with his schedule and other commitments he's got outside of wrestling. So yeah, it does make you question, like, this show without a Punk, what is that going to mean if they ran into a problem where he is out?
It would mean they'd be taking people from Dynamite to put on Collision.
They would have to. They would have to. But I mean, even that, this Collision project is going to, like, by the fall, we're going to know what the appetite is for 2 more hours of AEW programming on a Saturday. And the fall is going to be that much more competitive for them. This is training wheels for Collision this summer to get a hot product going and making it must see. Again, you don't want to be the sky is falling after 3 weeks. We need to have a longer look at things. And I do feel they will be up this Saturday. If they drop again, I think that would be very concerning. That would tell me that it's just too much AEW for people, that even a marquee match is not going to draw them in.
What would you like, drop from the week prior or drop from this number? Because I have
from this number. A drop from this number.
There's no way. Really, I mean, it's possible, of course, but it's really hard for me to, like, that to me would be where you would panic, having a marquee
that's what I'm
Punk
saying.
match.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not predicting that. I'm stating if that were to happen, it would be a larger issue of people skipping out on week 3 and realizing, you know what, it's the summer. I have a Saturday off. I'm not staying in to watch wrestling.
Right.
So they are going to be up against the UFC 290 prelims, but not the pay-per-view itself. So it is the International Fight Week card, which is typically one of the big ones of the year, but I wouldn't say this is not a blockbuster show that they're up against. That it's more than they were up against last week with a week fight night card, but it's going to be, I believe, Major League Baseball prelims, and I don't know if there's anything else of note going up against Collision this Saturday, but Regina, we will see what the number is that finally shows up for Collision. Independence Day cards from New Japan Strong. So we won't go through all of this, and I have not seen all the shows, but I saw several things. So the key title changes on the first night, we had Alex Coughlin and Gabe Kidd winning the Strong Openweight tag titles from Hiroki Goto and Yoshihashi. Drilla Maloney and Clark Connors winning the junior heavyweight tag titles from TJP and Francesco Akira. And in the main event, this I did see, El Desperado and Jun Kasai over Jon Moxley and Homicide. 18.5 minutes. This was utter chaos for 18 minutes and 34 seconds. This crowd was so hot for all 4 of these guys. And when Jun Kasai came out, man, like, this was a crowd. They wanted to see violence. They got violence. They brawled throughout the crowd. This is maybe the most lively I've heard Korakuen Hall since pre-pandemic. Like, they were just on their feet going crazy for this match.
Well, in many ways, it did not feel like a typical New Japan Pro Wrestling crowd, and this show did not feel like a typical New Japan Pro Wrestling show. Under the New Japan Strong banner, I suppose they have a lot more freedom, obviously, to bring in a lot of their strong talent, but also seemingly freedom to book styles of
guys
matches
from Freedoms.
Exactly. There you go. Yes, the freedom to do something you would never see in a New Japan Pro Wrestling proper show. a death match, and not just, like, I don't know, like I don't know, a few table spots here and there. You don't get more authentic death match than
This was a really
Jun
well
Kasai
done death match. Like, again, these aren't my things, but I can absolutely appreciate when it's done really effectively. And this was done really effectively. And I thought all four were great in this for their individual roles.
There is, I mean, again, it's not for everybody. I certainly don't expect everybody to enjoy something like this, but when it's done well and when it's done with heart, there is true artistry and brilliance in this style of professional wrestling. And I felt you got to see a great example of it.
And this is what was advertised. Like, this is
Yeah.
what was promised to you. So it's really hard to complain when they deliver on something like this. I was with you. I just thought this was so well done. This crowd was just, they were so into this as well. And I just thought, watching Jun Kasai at his age, just, I mean, he was just a superstar to this audience as well. And I mean, Desperado is someone that just, he has such a great chemistry with Moxley. Like the two of them from last year in Nashville, and then the follow-ups on both of these nights continued that.
And Desperado and Kasai themselves, having for many people one of the matches of the year last year. They very much kind of built off of the history between the two of them. This time they're pairing together, going up against Jon Moxley and a Homicide. And beyond just the match itself, and Moxley, obviously, he grew up in working this sort of style on the Independence, and you got to see the full expression of it here in what must have been. I don't know if they've like met in a ring before, Moxley and Kasai, but I'm sure for him it was very much a dream pairing. He got on the microphone to talk about what it meant for him because Jun Kasai was Danny Havoc's idol, somebody he really looked up to, and Danny Havoc, of course, passed away recently, and so for Moxley it felt like he was kind of in the ring with Havoc, with Kasai. So beyond that, just like the idea of doing this in Korakuen Hall, you can tell for somebody like a Moxley, and especially for somebody like an Eddie Kingston, meant a whole lot for them personally.
Oh my God, Eddie Kingston, like this was a religious experience for him, this trip to Japan. We'll get into that. Just from the first night, two other matches I saw that I just wanted to point out. Tom Lawler and Kosei Fujita, this was like an excellent 9-minute match. This was among the best Tom Lawler matches I've seen, and it was certainly maybe the best Kosei Fujita match I have seen. These two were terrific together. Lawler was in like the Don Fry American flag trunks for the match. And I mean, just his striking, so much of the match, it was about Tom Lawler using Zach's offense on Fujita, who's part of TMDK, to send a message to Zack Sabre Jr., like with the PKs and the different submissions that he was using. And I mean, this was just for a fun 9-minute sprint of great strikes. And like Fujita, I mean, this was a real level up match for him as well. So I would certainly recommend checking that one out. And then Willow Nightingale and Momo Kogo over Julia and Thekla. This was to set up Willow and Julia for today's show. But man, the takeaway for me, Willow Nightingale and Thekla were like two styles that were just made for one another. I mean, just with the size discrepancy, Thekla just bounced around for her, and it was just a tremendous playing off of one another with Willow Nightingale and Thekla. It just, everything gelled with them, and this obviously led to the title match the next day that we can get into. So those were a handful of the matches that I saw from the first show, but everything I saw was, it was a great crowd. I really enjoyed the commentary of Ian Riccaboni and Chris Charlton together with the two of them. So yeah, to your point, like I know some people that are subscribers to New Japan World, they get a little irked when there's a pay-per-view component to it, but for these two shows, for the $30 of what I saw, it seemed like this was, they certainly gave you two high quality shows.
I think it's annoying, like that when you're paying for a subscription service to have to pay something that's for something that's outside of it. It's not on top of it, to my belief. This is essentially something separate that you pay for, which is what Strong has always been, like you either on Fight or now on New Japan World itself. It's kind of annoying, especially when people like might not be using their New Japan World accounts as much anyway. But this was a good quality show, and I think people will pay for quality.
And then today's show, and both of these shows had over 1,400 fans in attendance. We had Jon Moxley winning the final death match against El Desperado. I have not seen this match yet. Did you get to see the main event?
Yeah, I did. it, whereas the first night was just like kind of crazy, boom, 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 like more of like your kind of like spot fest. I thought tonight, the one from today, the final death match told much more of a story, and the story was basically like Moxley beating the shit out of El Desperado all throughout the entire arena, doing everything he could. And I think El Desperado is just like, I mean, obviously, for a home promotion, quote unquote, guy, like he's a wonderful baby face to go up against these sort of like hardcore icons. And it was just really a story about his survival. And Moxley is really he's amazing, man. Like just to consider the amount of variation that this guy does, the amount that this guy has achieved in his career. Like this is a guy who's like, had WrestleMania matches, several of them, has a family at home, and still chooses to like fly over to Japan to have matches like these back-to-back nights. The dude did skewer spots back-to-back nights. It's insane. It was a fantastic main event. I would say much more kind of like story driven than the first night.
Eddie Kingston beat Kenta to win the Strong Openweight Championship with the Northern Lights Bomb, and you have never seen somebody put over a championship win through their emotions more than Eddie Kingston. I mean, this was him. Like this, I don't imagine he could have been more moved had he won the Triple Crown. Maybe the Triple Crown would
I think that'd be
another level for him. But my God, he was like in tears winning this. He's hugging Homicide at ringside, which was just such a cool moment. And then if you have not seen this backstage promo, which, I mean, it was just this man just emptying his heart of what this meant, from a young child who was getting into trouble, that found wrestling and now wins this championship. I mean, this was probably the highlight of either night, just in terms of just a feel-good moment for Eddie Kingston, who will now go into the G1 as the Strong Openweight Champion. And I mean, this title, I mean, it just takes on that much more significance with this guy winning it and treating it as just what an accomplishment. And it does tell you, with the plethora of titles that are out there, that when you can convey this, I mean, it tells your audience like how much the title means.
Yeah, I do though feel like he could have won, the King of Pro Wrestling trophy, and he would have probably still cried in this setting. I mean, just to kind of put things into context, here was Eddie Kingston in Korakuen Hall facing Kenta, somebody who was a part of that All Japan Pro Wrestling dojo system, like a direct, sort of like a descendant of the Four Pillars, and beating him, putting on, like his very much, Japanese legend inspired moveset, and getting that moment inside Korakuen Hall in itself is probably way more than he ever thought he would ever get in his career. So you saw the emotion on his face, especially immediately after he won. Had a wonderful embrace with Homicide, who clearly recognized what this meant for his friend as well. It was a wonderful moment. Yeah.
And the last title change to note is Julia winning the Strong Women's title from Willow Nightingale, 13 and a half minutes, also winning with a Northern Lights Bomb. And I did see this match, and they had a very good match together, but it does feel as though this was sort of correcting where things were going to go. And Julia gets the title and opens up her to come to the US to defend the title on future Strong shows. And we'll see if they revisit Willow, or at some point having a Mercedes match with Julia that now becomes a reality.
It really makes you wonder, if Mercedes actually won the match according to plan, would we have had Mercedes versus Julia? Or would that match have taken place? Would it have been a forbidden door? Would it have been, something that they would have saved for a show like this? I don't know, but I do know that they had a wonderful person in the ring with Mercedes to be able to fulfill that role in the meantime in Willow Nightingale. I think she was fantastic, not just in the match, but like in this match as well. Somebody who, was not supposed to be there, but felt every bit the champion that could be there, like should be there, really. And I thought they had a great match together, hard hitting. I'm looking forward to like stateside appearances from Julia, if that's what this means.
So two very good shows from the matches that I did get to see. And again, the crowds were great on both nights. So those are out there. They also stated on the show that Wrestle Kingdom 18 is confirmed for January 4th. That is not breaking news, but the fact that they are just promoting one night at the Tokyo Dome would suggest they are not reverting back to the 2 nights. They went back to 1 this past year. We have seen the extension of Wrestle Kingdom later in the month, but in terms of Tokyo Dome, I think 1 night is the way to go, even though financially for them, I mean, that was a big savior for them in 2020, the fact they had 2 nights at the Dome to do. It's just, you're looking at, okay, what could we cash in on 2 nights versus a product that is watered down, and does that kind of hurt the brand to have, and the perception of kind of 2 weaker shows versus 1 very strong night at the Tokyo Dome. And they did about 26,000, just over that for this past year. So they're still trying to rebuild to where they were pre-pandemic when it comes to the Tokyo Dome.
It's an interesting business decision, because you figure like they would have more incentive to do a 2-night event now that they have a full roster, more than full roster, when you consider, their partnerships with other promotions. But deciding to stick to 1 night and having maybe, a more of an all killer, no filler mentality, I'm sure it will result for a better show. So, let's see what they have.
A few notes coming out of NXT on Tuesday. This was the tape show. We had Braun Breaker and Ilya Dragunov closing the show. So that looks to be the next match for Breaker. And they're certainly going with the idea of Braun Breaker winding things down in NXT. Like, he's done everything, and now it's this match with Ilya Dragunov that's kind of the last big challenge for him. The Dyad beat the Creeds. This was actually, I thought the Creeds were excellent in this match. I mean, Brutus, this guy did a springboard 450 in this match. Julius continues to be like, these two just continue to improve. But the way that this match was laid out, you would certainly get the suggestion that they are getting the movement to the main roster. And whether you feel they're ready, if they could have used more time in NXT, it seems like they are going to be thrown into that deep end to see if they can make the move up to the main roster, unless they have some wacky idea here for the Creeds. Maybe they'll come back as under masks.
I feel like we have enough of those. Yeah. They're an interesting one, because I think they're still incredibly developing, I should say, when it comes to promos, and the main roster is a place where I think that sort of skill is emphasized. I definitely would pair them with somebody, but who?
I'd love Chad Gable to have a unit with these guys.
Okay. That wouldn't be the worst, but they would have to kind of overcome maybe more of a comedy thing. But
sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting with Alpha Academy, because they are still sort of in a role, but they are trying to get, I don't want to say serious with them, but they're less of the punchline.
I mean, the whole match was built around Maxine's arm drags and her caterpillars,
but they're the baby faces now. They are not just the butt of the joke now. But
right,
yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, they're an interesting tag team to watch, because I think everyone sees the potential of these two, especially Julius, down the road. And then we had the NXT Underground match with Eddie Thorpe over Damon Kemp, which I thought was really well done. This was a very entertaining version of the Underground concept. This was taped last week. And then after they had this match where Thorpe won, you had Gable Steveson come in and just suplex all these dudes all over the place. And it was really a spotlight for Gable Steveson going off the air at the end. Oh, well, this was in the middle of the show.
Yeah. Again, I really feel like NXT has been a good place to try out new match types, to just maybe in some ways correct ideas that might have had a bit of hope attached to them, but maybe for whatever reason weren't that well executed the first time. And Underground seems like one of those. I mean, this felt nothing more than I think more of a serious version of what they were doing before, and therefore it kind of basically was Bloodsport, wasn't it? In essence. I mean, a no rope thing with a live audience this time.
A slicker version of Bloodsport, with the WWE bells and whistles, but it was, I thought, man, they were Damon Kemp. This was a great performance by him, and Eddie Thorpe. He's a really talented guy, and I think that they found. I thought this worked. I mean, it worked so much better than the Raw Underground versions that were just so campy in presentation.
You could have used Shane, screaming all in the background.
Where was Omos to let
Um,
people into the door?
Yeah.
So that was NXT. And a final thing here is just looking ahead to UFC. It's International Fight Week. So they have their Hall of Fame ceremony on Thursday night. And those going in this year in the Pioneer wing are Anderson Silva and Jens Pulver. In the Modern wing, Jose Aldo and Donald Cerrone. And in the Fight wing, Robbie Lawler against Rory McDonald from UFC 189. So this is quite a stacked Hall of Fame class that they have between Aldo and Silva. That would easily be consensus among the best fighters of all time. Lawler and McDonald is a legendary fight in UFC history and one that did tons of damage to both individuals. And this is actually going to be, this coincides with Robbie Lawler getting this award on Thursday, and his retirement fight is Saturday at UFC 290. He's retiring at the age of 41, and he has been through some wars. This guy's first fight was in April of 2001. Okay. His career began before Julia Hart was born.
Yeah, that's how we know something's pretty old. Yeah.
So yes, you were at the Robbie Lawler Roy McDonald fight.
Yeah, I mean, I was working backstage, so you probably had as good of a view of it as I did. But
I was not at this event. I was supposed to go cover it, and it was my best friend's wedding. And I was in the wedding party, and it was one I had to turn the trip down, so I did not go to that show. That was the Conor McGregor Chad Mendes card.
I'm gonna take your word for it because I was knee deep in editing at that point.
Way's a professional. He's not here for entertainment. Yeah. He's there to work.
But this is quite the class. Like speaking as maybe a lapsed fan of MMA and the UFC. I mean, everybody listed here feels like a big name to me. So
yeah, I mean, Jens Pulver is one that I think his speech, like if you have never read his book or know his story, like this guy had like you hear of people that talk about like tough upbringings. It's one of the most horrific stories of just, being beaten as a child, and just amazing that this guy came out of it on the other end. So I think he'll have a very, very emotional speech. And he was a fighter that, like, when I was first getting into MMA, was one of my favorite fighters, and watching him against BJ Penn. And this was a guy that certainly, I mean, he to me he's not the class of fighter that an Anderson Silva or a Jose Aldo is, but he was one of like the key guys when UFC was trying to get that lightweight division up and running. And they eventually shelved the lightweight division because Pulver ended up leaving, and it was sort of just this weight class that didn't exist for years. But then he came back. He did Ultimate Fighter with BJ Penn, and he was involved in a real big fight in getting the WEC over with Uriah Faber in 2008. So, he has had his contributions for sure in MMA as well. But in terms of a speech, I'm most looking forward to his speech. As great a fighter as he is, Robbie Lawler, not the most vocal individual. So I don't.
He's my favorite, dude. Are you kidding me? Like, his anti-charisma is like the best. So I'm expecting him to just like go up, no smiles, and just like,
this guy,
everybody. Like, it's the best.
Thanks. This is great. Bye. Like, seriously, if he gave a one-sentence acceptance speech, would not surprise me at all. And Rory McDonald in comparison might sound like Winston Churchill in comparison with his speech.
What do you think Anderson Silva will say?
Oh man, why are you? Is that a trap?
It's not
trying to get
trap.
a clip.
Come on.
No, Anderson.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't have it in me. I haven't done Anderson in a long time. Man, you can't just put me on the spot like that.
Maybe after the speech.
Maybe
we'll get a
see.
recap.
Yes, we'll see if Anderson busts out any great.
Hey,
great
man,
stories.
the Tony Khan is quickly rising up. Okay, we got to get an update from Brad the Archivist about the top 10. I believe Anderson is still at the very top, but I think Tony Khan's making a run for it.
Well, you know what? It's a very prestigious level to try and reach the Anderson Silva pantheon of greats. So anyway, that's the Hall of Fame, and then UFC 290 is on Saturday. The major fights are Alexander Volkanovski against Yair Rodriguez for the UFC Featherweight Championship, and then Brandon Moreno against Alexandre Pantoja, who have a backstory where Pantoja has 2 wins against Moreno, including on the Ultimate Fighter in 2016. Then they fought again in 2018. So now he is challenging Moreno for the title. So that's an interesting story. Robert Whittaker against Dricus du Plessis, which could produce the next middleweight challenger. And Bo Nickel is fighting on this card. He got a new opponent this week in Val Woodburn, but Bo Nickel, an outstanding NCAA wrestler who has moved over to MMA. This is only his 5th pro fight, but he is seen as a major prospect at 185 pounds. And the fact that he is 4-0 and on the main card, you can certainly see they are giving the huge promotional push behind as well. And I mean, look at Val Woodburn. I mean, just scared out of his own photo here that he is going to be, I think he's a plus 750 underdog in this fight. I mean, look at him. He's just,
well,
he's in the shadows of Bo Nickel.
If anything, he'll earn a photo on UFC.com this weekend. So he's already won to me.
Look at the nickname, the Animal.
Creative.
You're going to be the Animal. So there you have it. And then Robbie Lawler retiring. He's fighting Nico Price. That's on the prelims. Jack Della Maddalena, another, 14-2. It's kind of, you can't call him a prospect at this point, but he is someone certainly on the rise. So this is it's a good looking pay-per-view. It's not going to be one of the big, international fight week cards of the past where they are stacked up and are going to do monster business, but it looks like a very good card. A little thinner on the bottom end of the card, but a good main card overall with some interesting stories going into Saturday's card.
No post show.
No, we will not have one this weekend. So we will have coverage. Well, if there's anything really that stands out, we will cover it on Monday.
There's a lot of wrestling to watch, everybody.
John needs a break this weekend. It's also my son's birthday, so people can give me a break for this one. Eric is also unavailable, so I was a one.
He's recovering his vocal cords from singing Batista's theme at Forbidden Pour. So
yes, and I wasn't ready to walk alone for UFC 290 on Saturday. Let us move on to Dynamite from Rogers Place. Did you notice here on Bell-owned TSN when the zoom in on the Rogers Place sign outside the arena was happening? Like, we're here at the Rogers Place. I was like, oh, wow, this is for Canadian TV nerds. This is a real entertaining battle of Bell and Rogers properties on a TSN broadcast.
I guess, when they go to the Bell Center in Montreal, they can't really avoid that either.
No.
This is why you name buildings.
That's the whole game, just so your competitors have to acknowledge you on their airwaves. And believe me, these companies are the pettiest that exist.
Would you say they're really competitors? I'd say they're both working together to completely screw this entire country at all.
They are, but they both want to be the sole proprietor of this country. They don't want to do it in concert with each other. I mean, these two barely.
There's no real competition. It's as much competition as the American political system.
Well, on that positive outlook on the media landscape, we start off with Renee, who is in the back with Keith Lee and Darby Allin. They're going to be on opposite sides of the Blind Eliminator Tag Tournament tonight, and Darby is egging on Keith Lee, telling him he used to be one of the most dominant champions, and if you think you're lost in the shuffle, then do something about it. Pull your head out of your ass, or you can just stand on the apron and cry about it. So this is like Darby lighting a fire under Keith Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Basically telling him, come out and kill me in this tag match.
Yeah.
So Orange Cassidy and Darby Allin are teaming against Swerve Strickland and Keith Lee. And by the end of the night, we would find out all our participants in this Blind Eliminator tag.
Yeah, unfortunately, for whatever reason, still no actual brackets to show us, in a much clearer way.
Well, we do know which winners are facing which. So,
you could create your own brackets, but I mean, anytime you went out to tournament, you just kind of figured in order to lay the scene out, you graphically show everybody. But one of us will make it, I'm sure.
Just give us a JPEG, AEW. That's all we want. Mm-hmm. So they show a clip of Keith Lee using a cinder block against Swerve and Parker Boudreaux in February.
Oh,
in February.
I mean, but the story extends way beyond that, doesn't it?
Oh, I know. This is just a random moment in time, and it looks like we'll never get the payoff to Trench, whose contract has expired. So
we found out his name, and then that was it. Took off.
That was it. Darby slaps Keith Lee, and then Lee launches him with a Beal, and Orange Cassidy is in, and he is getting chopped, and they're explaining how the orange punches, they're having less and less effect due to Orange Cassidy's ongoing injuries and continuing to tell the story of this broken down man. Swerve enters and gets in control, and Swerve and Lee are actually working together, including this Tower of Doom superplex spot to Darby that just looked insane.
I don't know if it was like, yes, it was them working together, but it was also an extremely clever spot because Lee actually was using Swerve with an offensive move. Like he was attacking Swerve at the same time as Swerve was attacking his partner. So it made complete sense.
Then Darby got placed underneath the steps by Swerve, and Orange Cassidy ends up on the floor and is on the back of Lee, who climbs the stairs with Darby underneath with Orange on his back. And Darby is just screaming as he is getting decapitated underneath these steps.
Like awesome. Like I mean, it's the type of spot that you wonder like how they're actually making this work. Like how is this guy not actually getting crushed under the weight? Yeah, maybe that's as much as that is, you know. I mean, he's the guy who's about to climb Mount Everest, so
yeah, this is nothing.
This is nothing. Yeah.
Lee squeezes the bad hand of Cassidy as he moves to the rear naked choke, and then Cassidy fights and fights to finally hit a stun dog onto Lee, manages a second one, and with Lee kind of hunched over, Darby returns and leaps over for a code red, which this crowd goes nuts for, and Swerve tries for a 450, missing the target, and instead lands on Keith Lee. But rather than feel bad about this, he laughs that he landed on his partner. Swerve then misses a roundhouse kick and nails Keith Lee. And from there, Cassidy and Darby take over. It includes a DDT off the top by Cassidy, and then a tope into a DDT onto Keith Lee, and Darby pins Swerve with the Last Supper in 11 minutes and 15 seconds, and Swerve just can't believe it. And Darby ends up clapping for Keith Lee and fist bumps him after, and Orange Cassidy does the same. So the idea here was that they were just trying to get that killer instinct out of Keith Lee here, and in the end, he respects Cassidy and Darby, and he still has his hatred of Swerve Strickland.
I thought this match was great. You know, lots of really, really smart spots from Lee and Swerve that were both spectacular, yet also furthered their particular rivalry. I thought Lee was really fantastic here. You know, great portrayal of him as just a giant. When you have two of your more spectacular cruiserweights in Darby Allin and, you know, Orange Cassidy being able to work around him, I thought Lee was used to really great effect. I love the spot with the steps. I love the the superplex into the powerbomb combo. And it
even the stun dog setup for the code red that got over so well for the there were so many little things in these matches that they all tie in together. And these four were, I mean, this was certainly, I think, like Keith Lee's best outing in a while. Like Swerve
better than last week. I certainly enjoyed it more than the Vikingo team up with Cassidy even.
Oh yes, I would certainly say so.
But yeah, there were a lot of really clever spots. You know, you basically had two guys work together against Keith Lee, and that just makes Keith Lee look amazing. It reignited his feud with Swerve, so hopefully we're finally going to get some resolution to that. And
next February.
Yeah, full year. We'll replay this moment. I love Cassidy and Darby as a tag team. I mean, first of all, like, can we call some shenanigans going on with these blind, quote unquote, eliminator draws? You know, what's RJ City up to when he's making these draws? These teams are awfully convenient, wouldn't you say?
What do you mean? You don't think that Matt Menard and the Butcher would be a natural pairing?
Okay, that does seem random, but come on, Cole and MJF, Lee and Swerve, Darby and Orange Cassidy. I don't know. I think it's kind of fishy.
Maybe this is a whole angle for RJ City at the end of it all. There is a vignette for Nick Wayne, and it features Darby Allin talking about Buddy Wayne, the father of Nick Wayne, dying on June 17th, 2017, and Darby getting the news that Buddy Wayne being his trainer and having an out-of-body experience. And when he came back, he thought of Nick and how he was going to deal with this. And he made a pact with himself to take care of Nick Wayne. They showed footage of him presenting Nick with a contract at the Defy event 2 years ago when he was 16. Now he's 18 and says that Nick Wayne is ready for this. He didn't get this contract because he's my friend, but because he is that good. And I thought this was going to start off like a series of these, like the story of Nick Wayne, but he is debuting on next week's show in Saskatoon and probably against, aside from Darby, probably your best opponent in Swerve Strickland with the history that those guys have in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, completely. I thought this video was fantastic.
Really good stuff.
Really, really good. I mean, everything about it seemed, completely truthful. And Darby was able to brilliantly explain everything. And I thought visually they told you in a short amount of time exactly who Nick Wayne is and why we should care. From his attachment to his father, to the pain of Darby learning about his death, and then to the deep promise that Darby himself made to take care of the guy's son. This essentially becomes Darby's story, which, is a wonderful way to connect Nick Wayne into the ecosystem of AEW with a fan favorite. So now everybody who's a fan of Darby Allin has a direct reason to care about a Nick Wayne.
And maybe an attachment to Sting. Like this becomes almost like a unit if you're going to attach him to them.
Yeah.
What 64-year-old with the 18-year-old.
What's sort of like the family name? Is Nick Wayne gonna have to put on some face paint?
I don't know if we're ready for that yet.
Yeah,
let's get through the match next week and see.
But it's like, Darby is essentially sort of like the Obi-Wan to Nick Wayne's Luke Skywalker here. And I think it's a wonderful way of bringing Nick Wayne in. I thought this video package was like a really great, sort of like rare, video package on AEW that lasted more than 30 seconds that did a tremendous job of telling you everything you needed to know.
Car pulls up and Jack Perry gets out and he calls last week ridiculous. And he's going to Tony Khan to request an FTW title match because he will face Hook inside of the ring. Hook jumps Perry, who gets back into the car and takes off. So this was a hell of a trip for Jack Perry all the way to Edmonton for this visit.
Well, I mean, come on. There's so much.
Go through customs.
Well, there's a lot of good stuff to do in Edmonton. Well, West Edmonton Mall.
You think he made it to West Edmonton Mall? You think he went skating in there?
Maybe he went to Banff.
Jasper.
Sure.
We're just turning into Jericho's promo now. We're just listing cities. Yeah. MJF and Cole. This was another out of the arena segment for AEW where they're at the health club hanging out over the past weekend. And MJF asks him to spot him and Cole is distracted on his phone. And then they spot an unassuming Puff in the gym.
Oh, that's who that was. Okay.
Yes. And so MJF is making jokes about him and Cole says, you can't say things like that anymore. But then says, he does look a lot like Tony Schiavone, and they both share a laugh. And Cole then does his lift, and MJF is just astounded at what he has seen here. So this would be a story throughout the episode, but the idea here is that MJF and Adam Cole, these are obviously the odd couple, but Cole is taking a liking to this guy, and it's going to cause friction with his other friends who just see MJF as this asshole who's probably playing you.
Yeah, like Cole. I mean, it's actually like a little bit complex here for a professional wrestling, story that we've seen kind of a million times. But it's like Cole knows MJF is trying to get him like off his guard so that he could turn on him eventually. But Cole might also be finding himself taking a liking to, MJF's sort of like heelish antics, and maybe he's actually falling for it. At the same time, I also think that MJF is aware that Cole is aware that MJF is aware, because they've been doing all of this on TV, and Adam Cole, for whatever reason, feels like MJF is not watching these shows, which I don't think is going to necessarily stick. Anyway, it's intriguing. So let's see how convoluted it gets.
More to come tonight. Yeah. The Acclaimed are out. Max raps about the Canadian wildfires and that the Bollywood boys,
the Trudeau brownface.
Yeah, they brought up that with the Bollywood boys in the ring and calling them two bitches and a dominatrix in reference to the Blade. So the Bollywood boys getting on AEW programming again. And this is a 6-man with daddy ass involved. At one point, Gunn threatened to take his tights off, and this was stopped by the Blade. They delivered the Scissor Me Timbers, did their big scissor spot, and then Bowens gets the hot tag. In comes Gunn, and Gurv gets set up for the mic drop. 6 minutes and 39 seconds, which included a picture-in-picture. I don't know if this was a match that needed a picture-in-picture, but I think almost every match on this show ended up getting the picture-in-picture treatment.
They do love their picture-in-pictures, yeah. It didn't seem like there were any real stakes attached to this one, and the only reason why you had the blade here is because the Butcher was taken up in in the blind tournament.
Yeah,
so-
was this our like blind non-eliminator tournament match where the
Yeah.
Blade just was like looking for partners and the Bollywood boys took
guess so.
him on as a charity case?
I mean, I guess so. It was really nice to see the Bollywood boys get on Dynamite. I wouldn't say this was the type of match where you got to see really much of them. They were really just here to kind of play, showcase opponents for the Acclaim.
Well, the Acclaimed were super popular in Edmonton, and then after the match, they're in the ring celebrating, and Harley Cameron is on the screen at the QTV offices holding a pair of scissors, and she has made a video to show them what real talent is like, and she will debut this video next week, calling herself Miss Money on the Mic, and they will be peanut butter and jealous. And Billy responds that he has 2 words for her, and just yells, "Suck it."
Mm-hmm.
No allusions to this, just full on going for it.
Well, do they have a copyright on "Suck It"?
I don't know. I don't know if this is a
Maybe that direct sentence. I've got 2 words for you. Suck it. They must have trademarked that, have they not?
well, I mean, it was used
Maybe.
here.
Well, maybe
I mean,
it's
they've
not.
always alluded to it, but I can't remember a time when Billy Gunn has just flat out used it. But nonetheless,
Yeah. I mean, this whole
maybe you know what? Maybe he went to WrestleNomics.com just before the show and saw that Jerry McDevitt is planning to retire soon, and he figured, you know what? Let's just go for it. K&L Gates, they've got their attention elsewhere. I'm going to slide this on national television.
Right. At least part of the story they are keeping up is that Harley Cameron is still like trying to, I guess, gain the affections of Anthony Bowens, even after like the big scene that took place. And
what's going to be left of QTV? Because Hobbs is on to bigger and better things. Harley Cameron is clearly one that they are breaking off to, I think, be more of a focused player on the show.
Mhm.
And I don't know if she necessarily needs QTV with it. So we're going to have like QT and Aaron Solo left together.
I think they're really just a faction in name, and I guess they do have these offices and they do need editors, and she did need people to edit this video, I would assume.
What's the rent on these offices? This is not a great time to be getting office space. Post-pandemic world.
point.
I mean, this could all be done from your laptop.
Work from home, QTV?
I think so. I mean, they're on the road. How many times are they in the office per week as it is?
Yeah, true.
They showed Eddie Kingston winning the strong openweight title earlier today from Kenta, and we get a promo spot from Jon Moxley talking about his history meeting Kingston in 2009. Doesn't know what Eddie Kingston has to be mad about when they each have gotten everything they wanted out of this business. He talks about people complaining about younger talent and being disrespectful. They build up the younger generation and tells Eddie to answer his phone.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get the, you haven't returned my phone messages, my texts, my tweets.
Well, Moxley is saying that about Eddie Kingston.
Yes.
Right.
I don't think Moxley is, he probably is not DMing him.
Is he much of a texter, you think? Or either of them much of a texter?
These guys, I bet you Eddie Kingston's a texter, but I would imagine Moxley is more of a pick up the phone kind of guy.
Well, I will say maybe he could have spoken to Eddie when
they were at Totocon. You're right. I just thought about that.
Damn, what a way to break the illusion. I mean, it's the coolest picture ever, seeing these three in the greatest.
Totocon posted this too. They kind of blew their spot here.
Nah, it's fine. I'll give them a break. But man, what a great place.
Yeah. What do you think these guys bought?
Probably whatever they could fit into that fanny pack.
Yeah. You should always work out the currency conversion before you get to the checkout, and you realize that your Terry Funk program cost a lot more than you thought it did in your head.
Well, it made for a great gift, though.
Yes, it did. All right. So after that, they do make the announcement of the participants, or at least most of them, for Blood and Guts. So that's coming up in 2 weeks in Boston. On one end, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Hangman Page, and a mystery partner against Jon Moxley, Wheeler Yuta, Claudio Castagnoli, Konosuke Takeshita, and their mystery partner, noting the fact that Kingston is in the G1 and Danielson has a broken arm. So I would think next week's show, you want to have those participants announced and figured out. So we will see who is added, but it is 5-on-5 in Boston.
I like that they didn't bother with some sort of bullshit excuse for Eddie Kingston. They just showed this
You
clip
can't.
of him, so
You couldn't.
and there's no need. There's no need to. Being in the G1 is a good excuse for why he's not at Blend Guts. But doing something like this, I wonder what the plan was. I guess if Brian was healthy, he would have just been in the match, and on the babyface side, they would have had somebody else. But this gives more intrigue for both sides. Now you have mystery opponents for both of them. So, any guesses?
I mean, it could really be anyone because anyone like that would be like top of your mind. I know everyone's gonna assume like
Jericho.
A Jericho. They're kind of dangling that's not crazy. I know everyone's really going to like throw out the Ibushi name. I would say if that was going to be something, I would certainly save it for something besides this.
You don't think why? You don't think this is big enough for an Ibushi debut?
I just think it kind of gets lost in the whole thing. I mean, it's not a terrible idea. It just on a week's notice, and I just think like that could be a really big introduction in AEW beyond a 1 week thing, and then he's just in this match and he's one of 10 guys.
Sure, yeah,
but that's who you think it'll be.
No. Wouldn't be great if it was CM Punk.
Sure. Why not? In Boston, no less. All right. Renee and RJ are with Matt Hardy with the tumbler, and his partner is Jeff. You mean my brother, Jeff Hardy? No, Jeff Jarrett. Oh, I hate Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah, that's it.
This tournament. Yuta cuts a promo. He's going to kill Kenny tonight. Oh, my God. Jericho comes out, major reception. Dude, he was so popular here in Edmonton. I mean, the Judas ended, and they're giving him a standing ovation, and Jericho says it's bittersweet because recently this year I've had a lot of big losses. It's time to reevaluate, and the perfect place to do that is here in Alberta, where my career began. And he mentioned starting in Calgary with Stu Hart. And you've got the crowd that are like, I think, chanting Stu, and Jericho thought they were boo, and you're like, You're really gonna boo Stu Hart?
It was the Mr. Burns meme, but like in real life, and the opposite way. They were chanting Boo Earns, actually.
You would think too, like if you did hear boos, you would assume it would be reserved for Calgary and not for a legendary figure in Stu Hart that they would be booing.
Yeah, there's no
but it was
way.
not. It was not. Shivani even pointed out.
Like if he said Bruce, okay, I could see people booing.
Okay, Blood and Guts, Bruce on one side.
Why? It's not even like Calgary. Like,
who cares?
Okay, Bruce Hart.
It's Bruce Hart in Boston, the site of the Survivor Series that he was a part of with the Hearts in 1993, with Stu in their corner in a Boston Bruins jacket.
Okay,
done.
Book it. Yeah, makes
Brett and Bruce
sense.
on opposite sides. It's WrestleMania 10, the match that was supposed to be. If not for Brett.
I love it. Dream.
One promo from Bruce.
I bet it would be a great promo.
Well, we're not going to do Bruce either. So he lists off all the cities he can remember in Alberta, and it's just getting a pop from, I know where that is. I know that highway. And he says, that was when wrestling was everything to me, and it still is everything to me. And it's time to become a better Chris Jericho, maybe the best version ever. And with that, Don Callis comes out, and he now has music. I don't know how I feel about this, that this guy doesn't need music, but it still got the crazy heated response. And he says that it was exactly 6 years ago today in 2017 that he called Chris and suggested him headlining the Tokyo Dome with Kenny Omega. You agreed, and we changed wrestling history. And he doesn't think Jericho's here in AEW without his idea. So Jericho comes back and says, if it wasn't for me, I brought you back to the wrestling business and I got you into AEW. So he takes credit for Callis. Callis says they both made history together. And recently I was betrayed by a coward punk, and I need a new family, and one that is built on trust. And he calls Jericho his best friend of 34 years, which, given that Chris Jericho has been debuted 33 years ago, I don't think they knew each other before wrestling. So I only point this out.
Both being from Winnipeg, you don't think they would have been friends somewhere?
I don't believe their paths crossed.
Why would you bullshit by adding an extra year?
I don't know. If I maybe I'm not aware of some pre-wrestling meeting. Maybe
he's just rounding up.
Could be. So he invites Jericho to join the family. Jericho says, I don't join factions, I create them. And you think he's going to turn down Callis, and he says, I have a one-word answer for you. Maybe. And he leaves. So maybe not.
Maybe, yeah.
Really heated segment. Like, this crowd, they loved Jericho. They hated Don Callis. And that added to the segment a lot. And you have the cliffhanger here. And you're right. Like, he is someone you could see maybe being a candidate for Blood and Guts.
He'd be a really weird fit for the Blackpool Combat Club, but it's a different style of match, I suppose. I really like this Chris Jericho promo, and I thought it was sort of like a perfect place, here to have him interact with Don Callis, the closest they're going to be to, Winnipeg, where he's and a guy who clearly is treating Alberta as a second home. It was the perfect place for him to sort of dangle this like babyface turn, or heel turn. You don't know, but tonight he basically played a babyface for Alberta, and I thought he did everything a babyface was supposed to do really well. But ended the segment with that ambiguous question of whether or not he has truly turned babyface, or if he's going to go more heelish by joining Don Callis. And I think we're all probably happy at this point to see the next version of Chris Jericho. His recent programs have not received some of the best reaction. Maybe, Sting, brief interaction aside, and that looks to be over, right?
There was very little in terms of follow-up to there was really no follow-up on that. Even like no mention of Sting on the show, or if it was very brief. It wasn't anything focused upon, nor would you get the sense here that they're going any further with this with Jericho and Sting.
Well, after what's diving off of a ladder through a table at 64 years of age, I don't know where else you go beyond that. But I'm excited to see what this next version of Chris Jericho might be.
They recap the Owen Hart Cup, and we got promos from Jericho and Samoa Joe in advance of their match Saturday. Punk comparing Joe to climbing the summit, something he has never made it to the top. And Joe says there has never been a day in CM Punk's life that he has been better than me. And it's going to be no different on Saturday. And Punk says he's going to beat Joe and win this whole tournament. Tell me when I'm telling lies, which I guess is now his spoiler alert that Heyman will do. So, yeah, I mean, this was very condensed. It was short. Do you feel they, in an AEW style that these are going to be quick and short, do you feel that this pushed you enough towards the match on Saturday?
Knowing what my expectations are for this sort of thing, the answer is yes. I expected at the very least, a mention of it. I might have even expected a lower third at least. So this kind of, exceeded my expectations. I think the main point they needed to drive home was that Punk has never beaten Samoa Joe. And he repeated that multiple times throughout this segment. And so you're led right up to Saturday with the story. Can CM Punk finally beat Samoa Joe almost 20 years later? Beyond that, I don't know how much more you were going to be able to tell in 30 seconds here, which is all the time they had.
Yeah. And a correction on my part is that on Honor Club, so the way they have it set up, if you go to the ROH events, you can sort by year. And in 2004, they don't have the shows up with these matches. But if you go to the collections tab, it does have the 3 matches from 2004. So you can watch those 3, and they're excellent matches. So, yes, we will see what number this pulls. It's the biggest match they've done on Collision so far. And
do you feel it was enough?
I thought they did a fine job. You left this show. I thought they did a good job of promoting this. I think more could have been done to just kind of go into the story of it, but I knew they're not going to dedicate that amount of time to it. But by the end of it, this did feel like a noteworthy match that you're coming away from this Wednesday show knowing is happening on Saturday.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm really curious to see how much of the audience, sort of the legend of Joe versus Punk necessarily connects with ahead of Saturday. Is somebody who, wasn't around and didn't really know about all that stuff. Are they as intrigued about it? Or is it just another match, between 2 name guys? to them.
Yeah, we're going to find out. I would not underestimate that stuff, that even for those that maybe were not following it at that time, they hear it enough that it feels like a big match.
The Kingo thing completely just, I think,
Like,
blows those expectations out.
And it's your biggest star in a very noteworthy match. So, I mean, there's reason to believe like it should connect, and it's certainly something very, very significant to have on this show on Saturday. Then they previewed Hobbs and Starks, which is the other match, and Roderick Strong getting taken out on the stretcher last Saturday. So Roderick Strong, after being stretchered out of Hamilton, was flown to Edmonton for a medical checkup with Doc Sampson. And Doc says that he's making progress, but we're going to take as much time as we need. Strong says, I feel amazing, as he's hearing a neck collar. Feels amazing. And Adam Cole comes in, warning him to be careful. And Strong says, what's going on with you and MJF? Cole says, I've got this under control. And with that, he gets a text message from MJF. I think they were on a Rogers wireless service here.
I'm guessing they were roaming.
Yeah.
Both of them. Yeah.
And MJF makes a crack about hitting a double clothesline in their match tonight. And this was something.
It was set up for a double clothesline. More importantly, we got to see Roderick Strong in a neck collar again. And of course,
this poor guy, he's got a history of neck issues.
Our friends at Poison Run are very quick to point out that, Roddy in a neck collar, NXT is canon. So
the difference being NXT, they took him to a hospital where he stayed in storyline. This one, they're flying him all over the country.
I mean, Strong knew what he was in for last time. He was in a neck collar, and he's completely no-selling the injury this time. He's not going to any hospital.
They plug Rampage.
Did he ever come back from the hospital?
No, he never came. This was a life-threatening injury that he suffered in NXT that he never came back from. Left the Creeds to lose their careers in NXT without his guidance.
His NXT
Ivy Nile's going to be all by her lonesome on Tuesday nights.
Yeah, so he's just pretending he's not hurt.
Rampage 100 is Friday, and Dynamite 200 is on August 2nd in Tampa.
Nice round numbers.
That's great.
I got to watch.
Yes. MJF and Adam Cole against Matt Menard and The Butcher. The abdominal stretch match. That's what this was.
So these blind eliminator matches are blind. Sometimes they could be quite random, and you ask why. Say no more than the words magic meat for why you would put Daddy Magic together with the Butcher. The Magic Meat might be the best tag team name in the history of tag team wrestling.
No one would order Magic Meat off the menu.
Oh, I would. I would have made them the champions just based off the name alone.
You would be. I think on one of our trips we went to a Wahlburgers and they served us Magic Meat.
Well, it was at the Pearson Airport.
Oh my God!
Yeah, it was pretty magical.
You and I were nearly died. So this match, there's a happy birthday chant for Cole. I mean, MJF was pretty entertaining in this match, where he's just playing like the most obnoxious babyface in the world, and it's like the crowd is all with it, which made this work. Because if this was Hamilton, and I hate to dump on them, I think this would have fallen pretty flat. You needed a crowd that was energized and engaged in the MJF Cole interaction, and unfortunately, Magic Meat they could have been any two other wrestlers on the planet. It was pretty much Cole and MJF were having a conversation for 7 minutes with these two other bodies in the ring to get the heat on them briefly. So MJF is in the match for like 7 minutes before Cole finally gets in. And throughout the heat, you've got MJF applying an abdominal stretch and coaxing Cole into grabbing his hand for leverage, and the crowd starts chanting, "Do it." So when Cole finally bends the rules, the crowd cheers. So again, this is all Cole like succumbing to MJF's ways and, having a soft spot for MJF that's growing over time. So in comes Cole. MJF is calling for the double clothesline, but Cole ignores him, fighting off Butcher and Menard, and then hits the boom in 8:51. And then MJF comes in and lifts him up, wants a hug. Cole just wants nothing to do with this guy at all. But it is just MJF. This is kind of more of a heightened version of what he was doing with Sammy Guevara. And prior to that, Jericho, like just the guy who just is adoring his partner, but you question the sincerity.
Sort of become like, you know, an MJF cliche at this point. You know, the guy who befriends like his would-be opponent in a very over-the-top exaggerated way. And I was like reluctant to see this direction for this Adam Cole feud because they had already started off so hard at the outcome of that, you know, time limit draw, that I think going back to this comedic route, I feel was going to lessen it. But this was very entertaining. I thought MJF was really funny here. Whenever he plays any sort of babyface, he really hams it up in like a really entertaining way. And I have a feeling this is going to work a lot better than the Sammy Guevara truce temporarily, because Cole is a babyface that people actually want to cheer. So I think it already is, you know, coming across a bit better.
So MJF suggests they have another bro session this weekend, which Cole agrees to. And then when he goes to
bro
leave,
session,
a bro session, yes.
Yeah.
MJF wishes him a happy birthday as streamers come up. There's balloons and the cheapest cake in the history of wrestling cakes is brought out. I mean, this thing was bought at Loblaws an hour before showtime, and it was the last one left on the tray. They put on birthday hats. Cole is stating this is all a bit much, and MJF sings happy birthday until Cole stops him from singing. And it all leads up to Cole going to make a wish and blow out the candle, and MJF tries to face plant him into the cake, but Cole sidesteps, knowing what the plot is, and it's MJF that gets the cake in the face. And at the end of it all, Cole says, "For all you've done here on my birthday, thank you, my friend." And we are left with two having a growing friendship.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, you know, a bit of symbolism there, meant to show that Cole is always aware of what MJF is plotting behind him. But it could also just be a bit of a misdirect, because I do feel like, because this is so out of character for an MJF, that he probably is, again, well aware that Cole is aware that he's, you know, being plotted against. And then maybe Cole is aware on top of that MJF is aware. I mean, these two are portrayed as like two of the smarter, sort of conniving characters in the company, and we're seeing kind of layer one of like what these characters should be doing. So I have hopes, and I have a feeling that it's going to get a bit more complex than that. And for that reason, I'm intrigued to see where it goes. But bottom line, is it entertaining right now? Yeah, I think it's entertaining. The idea of like choosing a double clothesline as a finisher is, for some reason, hilarious to me.
They're going to win the tournament, and that's going to be how they win it.
A double clothesline, sure.
Yes.
Yeah. It just sounds like the least interesting move possible that somebody could come up with, and for that reason, it seems kind of perfect.
But you're making it feel like it holds some importance to MJF. So when Cole finally engages with him, it means he's taken this guy in, and he's going with his double clothesline spot. Yes. So I kind of like that they've dangled that, and they didn't just give it away here. Renee is with Britt Baker, who doesn't care what Ruby Soho had to say about her last week because she lied. One thing you can never take away from me is my pride. The other is me winning the first Owen Hart Cup, as she brings in her belt. And you're going to be out in the first round this year, unlike the finals where she beat Ruby last year. Then Renee, who, again, very, very busy woman on this show, is with Jericho, Daniel Garcia, and Sammy Guevara. They want to know what's going on with you and Don Callis. Jericho says, you can't be under my wing forever. And Renee informs Garcia and Guevara, you're teaming up in the Blind Eliminator Tournament. What are the odds? Jericho says, this is great. This is your chance to go win the tag titles and find out who the leader is. So it's the beginning of the fracturing of the Jericho Appreciation Society. Never a good sign when the state of the group only involves like half the crew.
Yeah, I feel most.
Jake Hager's like, whatever.
I mean, Daddy Magic was, you know, he's in Magic Meat now, and I don't think he's already gone. I guess Cool Hand Luke stayed.
Cool Hand Ange.
Oh, sorry, Cool Hand Ange.
Paul Newman is not part of the Jericho Appreciation Society. He wouldn't put up with this.
I'm most concerned about Jake Hager and his hat. You know, maybe maybe as long as he has his hat, he doesn't need anybody else.
Britt Baker and Ruby Soho in the Owen Hart Cup. So this one got off to a rough start. I must have replayed like 3 times to try and figure out what the objective of this move was, where Baker does like an arm wringer and then goes to lift up Ruby for something. and they just go down to the mat, and Ruby just rolls out to the floor. And I don't know what this would have looked like if they did hit it, but it was just a mess.
Just looked like some sort of like, back body drop type of like lift, but yeah,
one was thinking one thing and one was thinking a completely different, because this was just a totally messed up spot where it was just a little rough as they were trying to like regain their timing after this beginning. They go through the break, and then from there you have the Outcast constantly getting involved. There's a Saito suplex to Baker, but then misses a double foot stomp, and Baker tries for the lockjaw, but Saraya gets on the apron. So as Paul Turner is checking on Ruby with the lockjaw, he stops and he goes to deal with Saraya.
Well, you can't have
hold on to the submission. I got somebody over here I've got to deal with right now. So we just continue on. Storm holds up the Owen Hart belt, and Baker gets hit into it, and she is hit with no future, and everyone thought this was the ending, but Baker kicks out. Big pop for that. Baker is then caught in a crossface, but kicks off the rope, reversing it to the lockjaw, and the Outcast just pull Ruby to the floor. This is not a DQ. This is nothing. This is just...
did the referee see it, though?
Where was he here?
Oh, it
was both Outcasts. Who would he have been distracted with? He had no one to be distracted by.
The referee was focused on the participant in the match.
She was being pulled to the floor.
Okay, so what was the spot again? Lockjaw?
The spot was Ruby in the lockjaw.
Yeah.
And then Storm and Saraya pull her to the floor.
Yeah, well, because the referee was looking at their faces and could not see their who was it? Ruby's feet. So
he doesn't see this woman being pulled out of a submission to the floor.
Oh,
it's
like, probably
is that the wind here in Edmonton?
She pushed herself towards the ropes. I mean, it happens.
Okay. So the match
if the referee didn't see it, he can't call it.
Baker attacks all of them and then drops Tony and then goes for the victory roll, which is how she won last year's tournament. But Soho reverses, crossing Baker's legs, and holds on to Saraya or Storm for leverage. This was a babyface spot for Cole and MJF. It's a heel move 10 minutes later, and Ruby wins in 10:07 and will face Sky Blue next week. So Baker is out of the tournament.
Yeah. I honestly, I found the match a little bit disappointing, even like beyond that blown spot. I thought there was really nothing all that special about it before the finish, but the finish was a nice callback. It continues to really, though. I feel like the Outcasts are like the closest thing we have to the House of Torture in AEW, meaning that they're just remarkably uncreative when it comes to using heel tactics. They're about as generic as can be. And you know what? Does it work? Yeah, I guess it works half the time, but I do feel like it's a real missed opportunity to do something a bit more memorable and a bit more special and less groan inducing in the right way, Yeah,
I didn't get into this match much. It was, to me, just between the interference and the first half of this, that they just seemed to be really rough in the timing and such. And I mean, I like the victory roll idea and the callback to last year, but that to me did not salvage the match. So it's Sky Blue and Ruby Soho next Wednesday, and then they've got to get to the finals because they have Athena and Willow on Saturday, which should be a very good match. And then the finals are in Calgary a week from Saturday. Rampage 100 has Jeff Jarrett and Matt Hardy against Sammy Guevara and Daniel Garcia. Those winners face Orange Cassidy and Darby next Wednesday. Big Bill and Big Brian take on Little Trent and Tinier Seidel. Those winners take on Adam Cole and MJF next Wednesday. Hikaru Shida against Marina Shafir, and the Young Bucks at Hangman Page against Dark Order's Alex Reynolds, John Silver, and Evil Uno to celebrate 100 episodes of Rampage.
A rematch from last week.
Correct.
Yeah,
yes.
Wednesday.
I take your word for it. Dynamite next Wednesday has those two tag matches, plus Jericho against Commander, Swerve Strickland against Nick Wayne, and the aforementioned Sky Blue Ruby Soho match in the Owen Hart Cup. So, yeah, interesting style with Jericho and Commander doing a match. And I mean, Jericho had that excellent match with Bandito, different performers, Commander and Bandito, but nonetheless. And then Swerve and Nick Wayne, for many reasons, is kind of the most intriguing match next week to just see how well Nick Wayne gets over. They will be in Saskatoon next week, Brock Country.
Yeah, absolutely.
I doubt he'll be visiting.
I doubt it too. I'm looking forward to Nick Wayne's debut the most, especially after the video package today. It tells me they're really going to treat him seriously, and he's not just going to be somebody that they're going to shove in there like maybe without that much fanfare. I'm looking forward not just to the match, but to see what sort of storyline he might actually springboard onto on this episode. And you'd imagine it'd be something with Darby, obviously. Jericho Commander, I think, is also a really interesting, like test for the both of them. For Jericho, like how is he going to work against somebody who wrestles like Commander, and how is Commander going to be able to maybe take advantage of having the spotlight that a Jericho match provides? Certainly the biggest match he's had in AEW, at least when it comes to star power.
And the main event, Wheeler Yuta against Kenny Omega. And man, both of them were great in this match. But Omega is like, his story is selling this Tiger Driver 91. So you can't say that this was a move that was just done for the night and they're not going to get maximum value out of it, because he comes out, he's taped up, and all the little things he did were just struggling with like anything to do with his neck, from lifting him up for the one-winged angel to the you can't escape, and he lands on the neck. Like, this to me is, for the criticisms we had of some of Rollins selling, I mean, this to me was the opposite, where everything had a price to pay that affected his neck, and Yuta just jumps on it.
Part of me wonders like how much he would have been focused on selling his neck if there wasn't so much of a discussion based off of that move itself. Like, I'm sure he would have been selling the shoulder or something, but because the conversation was so big about that Tiger Driver, I mean, either way, it was brilliant to use it in this match right afterwards.
I think regardless, you want to sell that you're coming out of this war, and he should be coming out damaged from it, regardless. But I think because that had such a spotlight, it's going to resonate more, because everyone knows like it has a story attached to it, and now we're going to exploit that story. So Taz brings up the Tiger Driver 91, and this is after the you can't escape spot. And as he rolls through, comes down on the neck, and he's just down momentarily, and it delays him from following with the moonsault so Yuta can get his knees up. They go through the break, and it's all Yuta here. He hits he gets hit with a superplex, and the crowd, they were red hot for Omega. Yuta manages rolling Germans onto him and onto the neck. Omega comes back with the Snapdragons and a V-trigger, and then goes for the one-winged angel, but it's delayed because his neck cannot support the weight of Yuta, who escapes and applies the seatbelt for a great near fall. Then catches Yuta for a powerbomb and V-trigger. Don Callis comes out, and he is surrounded by security, which distract everyone as Takeshita enters and hits Omega with a blue thunder bomb. Yuta hits the splash. Everyone thinks it is over, and Omega kicks out, and they go nuts. And he knocks Yuta off balance on the turnbuckle to hit the one-winged angel, which I thought was so clever, in that he knocks him off the elevated turnbuckle so he doesn't have to use his weight to pick him up, and hits the one-winged angel and wins the match. I thought this was just so well done for, I'm not going to advocate for the Tiger Driver 91 spot, but I am going to advocate for get absolutely the most you possibly can if you have done that. And I thought both of these guys were just, this was excellent. This was such a great storytelling match, and one where like you had this audience totally buying Yuta getting a victory once again over Kenny Omega. He felt like he was right there on Kenny's level as well. And this progressed the feud with Takeshita. The ending was so well thought out with the one-winged angel that, this was my match of the show, followed by the opening tag.
I feel most people, main eventers who maybe go through like a huge pay-per-view main event and then have a TV match right afterwards for a bit of rehab, they come in, they do their signature moves, maybe 5 minutes, you get out. They put so much effort into this rehab match for Kenny and made it, I felt like, a rather significant chapter coming off of a major pay-per-view main event. It was a story that gave somebody relatively low ranked like a Wheeler Yuta a huge spotlight to be able to go 50-50 with the Kenny Omega in a completely logical and justified way. Like you, I was really impressed with the way that Kenny was able to exemplify the neck injury through the failure of several of his spots, and the way he solved that puzzle to finally get Yuta up for that one-winged angel with him being already perched on the top turnbuckle. I thought was a real stroke of brilliance when it comes to his style of professional wrestling. It was an awesome follow-up to the Ospreay match, and now you have an extended storyline for Kenny Omega, who's vulnerable, who's beatable, much in the same way that Orange Cassidy has been, throughout his international title run. So it's yet another obstacle for Kenny Omega to have to overcome.
Yeah, and afterwards you had Claudio run in and join in on the attack on Omega with Takeshita when the Bucks and Hangman ran out with chairs, and they delivered a BTE trigger to Claudio, and we are past the top of the hour, and literally like the graphic is up giving like the copyright notice as Dark Order shows up to rip the chair away from Hangman, and boom, we're out. It was like the last second Dark Order gets this chair spot and takes it away from Hangman. So the show ends at 10:02, and as we mentioned last week, they did the overrun as well. So we'll see if this is a norm for them. But
do you think these overruns are intentional, or could they just like be over?
Oh no, yes, I fully think they're doing them on purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
So what happens if they're actually overtime?
I mean, we've seen some pretty damn close calls.
And what happens if they actually go over?
I mean, it's weird because it's not like you have like your local news to get to. It's not like they're on a network programming where it's like your affiliates have to start at that top of the hour, but it does kind of like you do need to have like your heart out for your schedule.
Yeah, but it's live TV.
It's live TV, but it doesn't mean they'll necessarily stick with it. Like we've had instances where like they've gone off the air and people have not known that like the show's done.
Right.
But anyway, I think they fully are aware of going over like they did last week, and they got a boost in those 2 minutes. So it was effective. I'm interested to hear people's thoughts on this because you did have, I thought, two really outstanding matches, but this was like a heavy story-driven show and a lot of, segments outside of just bell-to-bell wrestling, a lot of emphasis on like MJF and Cole. And I don't know how people will feel about a lot of like that kind of storyline aspects to it, but it was a different format than usual for Dynamite is how it felt to me.
I personally enjoyed it. This is something that I've kind of been clamoring more for from AEW. More storytelling, more video packages that are relevant, not just recaps. Although, like, I felt like there was an uptick in recaps as well. Again, relevant recaps, like, in the case of like Swerve and Keith Lee, where it's been like 5 months since we've actually, seen their last interactions, that caught you up with the story so that you could enjoy the match to a higher degree. This show felt more like well-rounded and as a maybe less one-dimensional, just as a pure wrestling show, and that's to my personal taste.
It's also taking, a relative gamble for some where we're going to play this Punk Joe video package, and that might hurt our quarter when we're showing a video package, but the hope is that whatever we lose momentarily, there's an impact for Saturday. For Nick Wayne, we're going to play this video package, not for tonight, but this is to pay dividends next week so that he shows up and he's got a story from day one when he shows up. And that's your balance, is that sometimes, okay, this is not for tonight. This is for a show in the future that we need to understand that we take one step back here with the hope of having two forward when this pays off in the future. So overall, I enjoyed the two matches. This was a relatively good edition of Dynamite, I would say. 2 hours and 2 minutes worth, and we will hear from you as well. So if you want to get any super chats, you are welcome to do so. Get those in. Way will be monitoring, and we will go to forum.postwrestling.com. Would you like to start, Way?
Let's actually go to a super chat here. This one comes to us from Jake from the Windy City. Thank you as always, Jake, for the support. He says, would it help Jack Perry's character for him to realign with Christian and Luchasaurus? And how about that wacky Australian Grand Prix last weekend?
It feels kind of like you're just going back at this point. I don't think he needs that, other than, well, he's a heel now and they're heels. I don't like the idea of just kind of retconning this like blood feud that they had, and Christian like literally tearing down this guy's deceased father and his family. And we're just going to say, well, I'm a bad guy now too, so that's all water under the bridge. I don't think Jack Perry needs to be with Christian and Luchasaurus. I think there's other people you could pair him with. He could be in Don Callis's family and make a lot of sense. And that's a fresh take for Perry. It gives him a mouthpiece with him, and it's not kind of convoluting your history of what was a pretty significant feud.
Agreed. I think it'd be too much of a step backwards, even just aesthetically, for Jungle Boy to be associated with those two again. I'd love to know what sort of interactions they may have to explain why he's not realigned with them, because you figure at some point they'll meet again, and Christian might make the offer, and I'd love to see Jungle Boy do something to show that he's grown past them, and maybe even exceeded Christian as a dastardly heel. So I hope he doesn't rejoin them. And the Grand Prix, did you get to watch the Austrian Grand Prix?
I mean, I had it on in the background. I wasn't watching it intently, so I don't have any strong thoughts.
I struggled to watch it in parts. Like 2 hours is a long time for, anything really on the weekend, especially just like with a baby at home. So it was really difficult. I am aware of like everything weird that happened with all the penalties.
Mm-hmm.
But it's as much of a part of the game as anything, it seems, like making sure that you don't get penalties, or making sure that the other teams do get penalties. Yeah, track limits.
All right, let's go to the forum. We'll start off with Jordan from the Bronx. This wasn't my favorite Dynamite, but still enjoyable. Collision has longer matches and a slower pace, and tonight seemed to slow things as well. There were longer pre-tapes, more promos in the ring. While I agree that AEW could allow more things to breathe, there's also times where things overstay their welcome. The Cole MJF segments were good, but after a while, I was ready for them to end. Very excited for the debut of Nick Wayne. It seems that they want to get behind him right away, as opposed to having him come up through something like ROH. The Cole MJF stuff is funny for the most part. It will be funny to eventually see who is the person that ultimately outsmarts the other to set up their match. Digging the spy versus spy aspect of this, as opposed to having Cole be completely gullible. I'll beat this drum every time. Please stop beating Swerve.
Agreed there. Let's go to Zubin, who says, "Evening, gents. So awesome to have Swerve in our glory reunited, if only just for one night. Their chemistry is just off the charts. I love Keith's delight when sneaking in attacks on Swerve. It might not be for everybody, but MJF's hokey BS with Cole popped me throughout the night. There's a certain reluctant energy that Cole's channeling, reminiscent of his BTE sketches with Silver and Reynolds, that works for me. Unless you've already discussed it, likely or unlikely that Cole gets seduced by the devil."
Well, I see them at least going at minimum to the finals of this tournament. And I think that you either have them explode in this final and they lose, or they win and they keep this going further into the summer. I think ultimately it's, you have your blow up point, because I think it is the match you ultimately want to get to. And I think they'll be very cognizant of not making Adam Cole, though, the buffoon babyface that gets outsmarted by MJF. I think you want to have like a strong babyface. And I think you could certainly see that tonight. Like, this is like, we're not going to position Adam Cole as who's getting one up on or getting one upped by MJF. It's like, this guy is ahead of the game. Does he know that he knows that he knows that he knows? That's the way I put it.
Well, I mean, he won't be the buffoon babyface, because Adam Cole's true nature is that of a heel, much in the same way of MJF. I mean, MJF was influenced by Adam Cole. So, this is a guy who knows exactly the MJF playbook, and he's going to do his best to navigate it. With the glimpses they've shown of like Cole basically like respecting, or at least like wanting to join in on MJF, like, with the getting leverage for the abdominal stretch and whatnot, shows that he's like trying hard not to like this guy, because they are similar people. How are they going to turn that into like a rivalry? How are they going to make these two hate each other so much after this? And how are they going to do it while maintaining Cole's edge, which really was the missing ingredient, I thought, in the first month of his babyface run with Chris Jericho? It'll be interesting, and I have a lot of faith in them being able to stick the landing. We have a super chat here from Jordan Stovra, who sends $14 Canadian. Thank you so much, Stovra, for the generous super chat. He says, Jordan from Saskatoon says, next week might be the biggest wrestling show since MVP wrestled at the Highland Curling Club in 2015.
I don't know if it'll exceed that, but it's pretty big.
I hope my province proves the negative comments I have seen wrong. Are there
what have the negative comments been?
Are people slighting Saskatoon? Come on.
kind of unfair. I mean, Saskatoon is not a TV city, so you don't really have a existing opinion to base Saskatoon on in terms
What are
of
tickets out so
liveliness.
far? Do you know?
Well, for
what are
Regina, they
total
were not doing great. We can let's pull up WrestleTix here and see what the latest is on Saskatoon. Edmonton tonight was almost at 6,000, I believe. 5,500 tickets distributed. So that's a healthy Dynamite crowd. For next week, I'm scrolling here, looking. Regina's at 1,500. That's for Collision next for this coming Saturday. Are you surprised it's that low?
Yeah. Is that what's the most recent update?
That was okay. The last update for Saskatoon was 2,300. That was on July 2nd. So, I mean, these are not huge numbers in Saskatoon.
Okay,
they're both under 3,000 at this point.
I hope they sound lively on TV. At least
we will see. This is a sizable undertaking.
I think Jordan from Saskatoon needs to tell all of his friends to help fill this arena. Yes, bring his family.
And that wraps the Canadian tour with Calgary on the Saturday. And then they go back to the U.S. for Blood and Guts, their return to the United States. All right. Well, thanks for the super chats. Thank you for the feedback. Again, we have plenty up on the Post Wrestling Cafe, Rewind Away, a review from Karen and Bruce covering the Independence Day cards from New Japan Strong, and more to come this week with Rewind to SmackDown on Friday night at 10 Eastern and Collision Course with John Cena and Kate from Montreal, who will they will bring the takes this coming weekend. So check out that as they will be reviewing Punk versus Joe. You can support us at postwrestlingcafe.com, video.postwrestling.com. And if you want to jump in on the G1 fun, it is postwrestling.com/G1, free to enter the contest. Get your picks in before July the 15th. And we will be doing coverage of each and every G1 card with our block of capable hosts that we will be having cover each and every show and block and match as we push the limits of what is doable in the summer of 2023.
We'll find out.
Okay. That's it for us. Thank you to all, and we will speak with you later this week.